Welcome to the Relevance Report, where we explore the relevant stories that are shaping our world today. I'm Stefano Farah, your host this week. On today's show, new kids on the block in the BCHL, the Sherwood Park Crusaders bring their new league its second ever Pride Night game. A look into what really happened with the Rogers Sugar Strike and who it affected the most. Behind the scenes with CBC's Stephanie Dubois and the story of the Philippines' mass export of nursing. Some cold weather coverage as we take you to the Wilfrid Laurier Park for the Silver Skate Festival. The Junior A Sherwood Park Crusaders hockey team made history last night when they hosted their Pride Night game, the first event of its kind at this level of hockey in Alberta. Evan Watt attended the game and spoke with its organizer, CJ Pirtle, as well as invited members of the LGBTQ+ rec hockey team, the Edmonton Rage, about what this event means for the people in their community.
On February 23, 2024, the Sherwood Park Crusaders of the BCHL hosted their first ever Pride Night game. If you're familiar with the NHL and its history of Pride Nights, you've heard the phrase, hockey is for everyone. And for the most part, in Canada's 7 metropolitan cities that host their own NHL teams, it's a statement that is generally agreed upon. When you leave these areas, however, and you venture out into Canada's small towns, where folks live and die by their junior hockey teams, the statement of hockey is for everyone can seem a bit harder to believe. That good old boy hockey culture still runs deep in a lot of places, especially here in Alberta.
I think the only real obstacle was kind of just worrying about how it would be seen by, the people who live around in this area, It's not the stereotypically most accepting community, so it's that kind of challenge where we kind of have to look at the appearances of things and kind of see how we look. I honestly think we did really well in representing our community with honor and dignity and pride.
That's CJ Pirtle, media director for the Sherwood Park Crusaders and organizer of the Pride Game. They talked to me about what it's like to host a game like this in a town with such strong hockey lineage.
I think it was a great experience, especially I've never organized an event like this before, and honestly the Crusaders organization made it very easy on me to organize their first ever Pride game that they've never hosted one before, and I wasn't aware of that before I undertook it. They made it really easy on me, honestly. They pretty much they essentially did everything for me. They just kind of how about we do this? They came with me with a bunch of ideas to make tonight great, and honestly it turned out very well.
Members of the Edmonton Rage, the city's LGBTQ+ rec hockey team, were invited to the game by the Crusaders. I spoke with a couple of them about the night and how they view the future of inclusivity in hockey.
It's really important, queer people don't just exist in the city, so it's important that other places around Alberta start hosting these Pride Nights to let queer people know that they are included and welcome in hockey.
Still important on this level in a lot of these smaller towns, because junior A teams are often in not major urban centers. So it's important to have these type of nights in these areas outside of a major urban center. As someone who grew up in a small town just outside of Winnipeg, it's nice to see these communities outside of major cities having these kind of nights.
Reaction from the players, the coaches, especially our general manager and our owner, it's all been very, very good, very inclusive, very supportive. When I asked about Pride Night, because I saw it on our calendar earlier this year, and I talked to our general manager about it, and he said, well, why don't you organize it? Because obviously we don't know anything about that community, and so we want it to be good, and we think that you can make it good. And I feel I took on the responsibility, and I feel like I did a pretty good job. And the players, obviously, they're more than happy to participate and show support, and our coaches and management staff as well.
Though it might seem like a small step, it's a historic and important one. Through community initiatives like these, and with the help of amazing people like CJ, hockey can and will one day truly be for everyone.
There's a very rigid hockey culture that often is heavily entwined with misogyny, sexism, homophobia, racism, etc. Hockey culture is generally not very nice to people outside of cisgender, straight, white dudes. So I think that in order to make the game more accepting, it requires a larger cultural shift in the hockey world. And that's a lofty goal. It's not an overnight goal. You have to look at changing the very base of how you raise the boys or everyone since they're a kid all the way up to junior professional, because the culture often sucks.
I think it's a very slow process, especially with what's happening in the top tier of hockey, the NHL. I feel like last year we took really a lot of steps back, but I feel having nights like this, especially in junior hockey and junior A, nights like this are just super important, and they might not happen all the time, but as soon as you kind get your foot in the door, especially in a community like this, it really opens people's eyes, and it gives us an opportunity as an organization to educate people on why hockey should be for everyone and why eventually it will be.
We have some sweet news when it comes to the Rogers Sugar shortage. The employees over at Rogers Sugar have struck a deal with the company, which is great news. The vote on the new 5-year agreement was overwhelmingly in favor, with 94% of the employees giving it the thumbs up. This deal includes better health benefits, higher wages, and a real focus on keeping this work-life balance in check. Yours truly, Stefano Farah, reports. Sugar, a crystalline substance that has woven its way into the fabric of our modern lives. From the sweet treats we indulge in to the comforting warmth of our morning cup of coffee, sugar is a staple ingredient that adds flavor and joy to everyday experiences. In 1890, a man named B.T. Rogers, a visionary entrepreneur, had a keen eye for opportunity. He single-handedly laid the foundation for what would become one of Canada's leading sugar refineries. Recognizing the exorbitant costs associated with transporting refined sugar across the vast expanse of our great nation in Canada, Rogers saw a solution. He set his sights on the bustling port of Vancouver, where he envisioned building a refinery that would revolutionize the industry. And so, with determination and foresight, Rogers' dream became a reality. His refinery, nestled along the shores of Vancouver, quickly became a beacon of innovation and prosperity in a city dominated by logging and fishing. It was a testament to the power of entrepreneurship and the endless possibilities that awaited those willing to seize them. Yet, amidst the rhythmic hum of machinery and the sweet aroma of freshly processed sugar, tensions simmer beneath the surface. In the year 2023, the tranquil corridors of the Rogers Sugar Refinery in Vancouver became the epicenter of a brewing storm. The company's management, driven by a desire for increased efficiency and profitability, unveiled a series of ambitious proposals aimed at reshaping the working conditions within the refinery's hollowed walls. From the proposed alterations to wages and benefits to the continuous plan to transition to a round-the-clock operational schedule 365 days a year without hiring any additional staff members. This new proposal ignited a firestorm of dissent among the refinery's dedicated workforce. And so, on a fateful day in September of 2023, the Rogers Union, known as PPWC Local 8, issued a 72-hour strike notice to the company. What followed was a battle of wills that would test the resolve of both management and labor. According to the Canadian Sugar Institute, Canada produces approximately 1.2 tons of refined sugar annually, around 94% of which is refined from raw cane sugar that is imported, is refined in both Vancouver, Toronto, and Montreal. This strike affects those of local businesses. Danica works at Prestigio Bakery, where they serve fresh pastries and sweets to their customers every day. For her, The scarcity of essential goods like sugar isn't just an inconvenience, it's a direct threat to her ability to serve her customers.
Yeah, we're kind of worried. Yeah, we don't have brown sugar lately. Currently, we don't have the little packs. Yeah, the single packs. We only use the big ones and put it in a container.
Danica isn't the sole individual grappling with uncertainty. As the strike prolonged, grocery stores remained unable to supply the products necessary to meet their customers' needs. Grocery retailers, such as No Frills, have faced ongoing challenges in maintaining stock shelves amid the prolonged shortage. When I attempted to discuss the situation with manager Chris, he indicated that due to the sensitive nature of the labor disputes, he and other No Frills locations were unable to provide insight. However, I had the opportunity to speak with Alicia, a 4-year employee, who shed light on the sentiments of the customers.
Lots of customers have complained about the sugar. They keep asking about it, and I just really don't have an answer for them.
But amidst the turmoil and strife, a glimmer of hope emerged on the horizon. After weeks of tireless negotiations and impassioned pleas from both sides, a breakthrough was finally achieved. In the spirit of compromise and collaboration, the Rogers Workers Union and the company's management reached a historic agreement. A 5-year deal was struck, one that not only addressed the concerns of the workers, but also laid down a foundation for a more equitable and harmonious working relationship. With the strike finally over, the sugar employees reclaimed their rightful place within the refinery's walls. And so, they've shown that even the toughest situations can be turned around with the right ingredients and the stirring force of community solidarity. From Edmonton, Alberta, I'm Stefano Farah. Daniel Smith's UCP government has drafted legislation that will restrict access to gender-affirming care and risk outing vulnerable queer and trans youth in the school system. It has been criticized widely, being called everything from ill-informed to draconian. The policy is tabled for implementation by fall 2024, creating a sense of fear and dread in the province's 2 LGBTQ+ communities, who have responded with an ongoing string of protests and demonstrations. One organization is using community choir and song as a means of queer resistance, unity, and support. Zach Defoe reports.
On this unseasonably warm, mid-February day, over 1,000 people line the streets in front of McDougall United Church in Edmonton, Alberta. Despite the rolling sunshine and gentle breeze, a different kind of chill still hangs in the air.
Protect trans kids! Protect trans kids! Protect trans kids! Protect trans kids! Protect trans kids!
These people are members, allies, friends, and family of Edmonton's 2S LGBTQ+ communities. Rainbow and trans flags are hoisted and waved, held tight as the crowd begins a 2-laned march down the street. They stay together, moving under the cool urban shadow of downtown toward Churchill Square. Legislation working through the pipeline of Danielle Smith's UCP government threatens to erode the rights of queer and trans youth. It will restrict access to gender-affirming care, access to educational resources, protection from being outed, and more. Edmonton has seen many demonstrations just like this in the past few weeks. But today, in needing to be heard more than ever, these folks are raising their voice in song.
Say what you wanna say, and let the words fall out. Honestly, how honesty you be brave.
Music was chosen as a way to be hopeful. Music is a great way to unite people. It's almost universal in how it affects us emotionally.
Evan Westfall was one of the many performers of more than 90 choir groups assembled. He's also the programs manager of the Firefly Institute, based out of the U of A. He says that Firefly is unique in that its research programs are directly related to grassroots community initiatives in support of 2S LGBTQ+ communities. So in a space like this, he's right at home.
And so it was a way that we could connect and rally, and particularly for this event, positivity was something that we really, really wanted to understand and express, while at the same time holding space for anger and for a need to achieve equity. The people rallying together had music as a readily available skill that they all possessed. So it was a group of kind-hearted human beings who said, hey, we're seeing something really negative happening here, and we need to do something to act in a positive way. And thankfully, it was a bunch of the choral community leaders in Edmonton that did this, and a lot of them said, hey, I might not have great strengths relating to legislation or community organization, but oh my goodness, can I organize the heck out of a concert? So they decided to pair with people who had a lot of different skills, and that event was sort of the confluence of those different skills.
The red brick church was filled to capacity, filled with love, support, and warmth. 2 tiers of wooden pews filled with people, song belting skyward toward the off-white painted ceiling. According to Morgan Evans, a researcher with the Edmonton Queer History Project, song has a long history as a tool of resistance for marginalized groups.
There's such a long history to the protest song and protest music in general. If you look at a lot of those lyrics, even going back to like old work songs, labor movement stuff, and even earlier, you have this very focused call to action. It's really about rallying a community around an ideal. For like group song, we haven't always seen that within the queer community as much. That seems to be more of a recent thing, even though there's been like a long history of queer musicians and vocally queer musicians, especially when it comes to specifically trans people. For us, there's a certain extra level of importance to it because the voice, like so many aspects of presentation, is heavily stigmatized. And in the past, you had Coachinella, who is somebody who was very sexualized and very much presented within a certain beauty standard, and whose voice was a quote-unquote woman's voice. And then on the flip side, you have Vaginal Davis and her terrorist drag, where she was too gay for the punks and too punk for the gays, as she said. So there is that kind of reclamation of the voice that's so important.
Back outside, the crowd marches on and carry their voices high. The coming years may be a struggle for queer and trans rights, but the community will clearly not be silent. From downtown Edmonton, Zach Defoe.
In 2023, CBC producer and freelance writer Stephanie Dubois was awarded the entire R. James Travers Foreign Corresponding Fellowship. The fellowship came with an award worth $25,000. We had the privilege of talking to her about the fellowship, where she tackled the topic of overseas recruitment of nurses from the Philippines and the implications of that on an international scale.
So Stephanie, how did this story come about to go and do a long-form radio documentary about recruitment of Filipino nurses coming to Canada?
So it started out because at the time we were seeing a lot of headlines about people having to wait, 16, 20 hours plus in the ER rooms across the country, not just in Alberta. And a lot of the provinces were saying, oh, don't worry, we're going to try and recruit nurses specifically from the Philippines. And some of the provinces were really saying that they were going to rely heavily on these nurses to fill the staff shortages that were leading to some of these ER problems. And the more and more I talked about it with just different folks in the healthcare system, the more I was realizing, like, well, what actually happens in the Philippines? Because these nurses come and they work in the hospitals, they work in long-term care homes, but we don't actually know what these governments are doing to get Filipino workers here in Canada. And there's this whole system from universities to the recruiters themselves to the nurses that are really just trying to get nurses to Canada. But in some ways it's great, but then as I heard from experts, a lot of ways there's a lot of issues that go on with this recruitment.
In a country like the Philippines, remittances is a huge part of the economy. How much does that factor into this?
It's huge. It's a very big economic driver for the Philippines. It accounts for a large part of their GDP. The remittances that are sent over from not just nurses, but from workers on cruise ships, workers within schools and such as janitorial staff, for example. It's a huge part of their economy, and so there's a huge drive to try and get Filipino workers working abroad. The Philippines government has this whole marketing campaign where they're saying that, like, the Filipino smile lights up the world, and there's various examples of how the government itself is actually promoting Filipinos to go and work abroad, to have a better life for their family, and to send money back to their families still back home. There's multi-layers to this story. It's not just a healthcare story, and remittances is such a huge part of it.
Another piece of the puzzle was some people that you talked to. Can you tell us who were some of the people that you talked to for this piece?
So one of them was Mary Joy Dizon. She was the nurse that was the focus for my first episode. And her story really tugged at my heartstrings because she's working full time and she can barely afford housing and food. And she's trying to save up to take what's known as the NCLEX exam. So it's an exam that they take to try and get certified as a nurse in Canada. And it's $500 Canadian, which maybe some middle-class Canadians wouldn't say is very expensive. But for her, she's been trying to save up for years to get that test so that she can come to Canada and basically start working in the healthcare system, and she can't afford it. And she's been trying, and she wants to give her son a good future and send him to university, but she can't even afford to pay food and housing there. And she's a nurse. She's working in a hospital, a very busy hospital. She looks after, I think, upwards of 20 patients per day in the ER, which may not seem like a lot, but that is some heavy duty caseloads. And the pressure that she feels at home, but then also the pressure to migrate to another country to earn a better income is just, it's really difficult. There's layers upon layers for each of these nurses that they're facing. It's not just, oh, I want to go and earn more money. It's obviously they want to earn a better life for them and their families, and the government there isn't giving that to them, unfortunately, and it's really difficult. But then I also went behind the scenes and sort of got an idea of the recruitment process, which was really interesting, and that was a big part of the focus of the fellowship because, like I mentioned earlier, we hear a lot from the provincial government leaders that, hey, we're going to recruit in the Philippines, but they're not transparent about what's actually happening in the Philippines. And so I was able to tour around with the recruiter, and he basically told me that they go to the hospital and they basically recruit, steal, however you want to phrase it, nurses from the hospital to try and get them to go to countries like Canada. They worked with Manitoba specifically, and yeah, it was really eye-opening just seeing the recruitment process and getting a better idea of how they actually get nurses to Canada.
What drew you to a healthcare-focused career in journalism?
I really think that healthcare is something that obviously everyone cares about, but I think also more importantly that it is one of those subjects that it gets focus, but it tends to usually only get the negative focus, right? Like those long waits in the ER. You definitely should hear those headlines, and that's definitely the focus. But there is a lot of stuff that's happening with health where it's ever changing. We're learning new things like every day, right? And what's really interesting to me too is because each provincial government is running their own healthcare system. There's vast differences even between, Alberta and BC, for example, right? And I think everyone is touched with healthcare in different ways, and everyone has a story about a family doctor that they want to hear and tell. And so I just always find that when I finish a day at work, I usually learn something new. And I don't think you can say that in every job. I think there's a lot of negatives in journalism, but being able to learn and hear people on the ground stories as opposed to just experts is a real big plus for me.
Do you have any other big goals that are bouncing around in your brain right now?
Yes, I would love to figure out a way to use my skill set outside of CBC because, I'm cognizant that CBC is not going to be around forever, right? And so I'm always trying to think about how I could use my skills as a journalist and still tell stories, but not necessarily for just one outlet, right? And I think that is something a lot of journalists are struggling with right now, especially those that are laid off. And so trying to figure out what makes me me. I would love to do more international reporting, that'd be great, but I'm also realistic that the money for that reporting is not there. It's not one particular project or anything, but just making sure that I can continue telling stories beyond whatever it looks like at CBC.
What would you say inclines you to prioritize or chase one story over another?
I think it really depends on what people are talking about. For example, right now I have a story on my plate about, this nursing pool, and okay, it's interesting. Definitely want to pursue it, but I don't think people are talking about that necessarily. Versus I'm doing one about a story in Newfoundland where in some of these rural areas where they can't find doctors and nurses, they're using this virtual service that is American-based. Even though that's a Newfoundland-based story, people across Canada are talking about virtual services. There's numerous examples of people using virtual care, and I think people will care about virtual care and what that looks like. So I think it really boils down to how important is this story to tell today.
Are you a fan of winter? Enjoyed the cold air? Check out Edmonton's own Silver Skate Festival. From snow sculptures to folk trail art, the Silver Skate Festival boasts a wide array of family-friendly winter activities. Amanda Erickson chats with Executive Director Aaron DiLoretto about the changes to this year's festival.
Edmonton's own Silver Skate Festival concluded on February 19th after another exciting run in the city. Just down Buena Vista Road, the festival was tucked away in Sir Wilfrid Laurier Park this year after a successful 33-year run in Horlack Park. Entering the festival, you are greeted with the sounds of the Abraham Lake Singers, with their drums resonating through the snowy landscape. Sculptors chip away at larger-than-life slabs of ice while kids are lacing up to get out on the giant skating rink perched in the middle of the festival. The energy is an anticipatory calm, echoing out over the trees. Opening in 1990, the Silver Skate Festival began as a small skating event embedded in Dutch winter traditions. Now, the festival celebrates winter sports, music, art, and recreation for the whole family.
I love winter. I like skiing, snowboarding, and I like festivals and stuff like that.
Although winter can be a tumultuous topic for some, it seems that festival goers and volunteers alike are finding enjoyment in the cold.
Just togetherness, community getting together and get out and enjoy it while we can, as long as it's not minus 40.
However, it hasn't been all fun for the festival this year. The Silver Skate Festival is Edmonton's free winter festival and is governed by a non-profit society. Achieving successful funding for nonprofit organizations is always an arduous process, but this year was particularly difficult. Executive producer Aaron DiLoretto shares her unique insight on this issue.
It's a lot like birthing a child. We nest and we prepare for the baby, and then we have the baby, and then we start all over again. Fund development, programming, hiring my creative team and the artists that make this showcase and celebrate what's so incredible about our winter city. But this year we saw some extensive funding cuts, so we had to cut the majority of our programming. And then we also had the secondary challenge of moving to a new site. Like everybody, everyone is feeling the constraints of inflation. For example, with just one of our grants, we saw almost $50,000 in funding cuts. That's just one of our grants. You present a free festival to the public does not necessitate that we do not have any expenses. So we had to make some hard decisions. And for us, it was canceling our live music. And that breaks my heart. But in good conscience, I cannot ask artists to give more for less when that's been the narrative forever. If we want to create a healthy arts ecosystem and celebrate and support our artists and give them the accolades they deserve, we need to try and pay them appropriately. And I use the word try quite gently.
So, what does the future of the Silver Skate Festival look like? Well, despite the obstacles faced by this year's festival, it was a wonderful success. After 18 years in her position, DiLoretto maintains hope for the future of the Silver Skate Festival.
18 years, my role has grown as with the organization. We're a small but mighty team, so I'm really happy that we got off the ground. I think one of my greatest joys is seeing our newcomers coming down and embracing our winter. Dressed up, they're prepared to come celebrate and embrace this new culture and community that has welcomed them. And I'm excited to see Edmontonians out. I'm excited to see people try new experiences. And I find a lot of joy working with my team to showcase and celebrate all the incredible things that happens in Edmonton. Been very fortunate to travel around the world, see different things, present and produce in different parts of the country, and I think we're really blessed in a lot of ways with what our community and the opportunities to share our stories. I've often said that I don't go to London, England to look at Alex Jean-Vanier paintings, even though he's an incredible Alberta artist, or buy tickets to go to a Guess Who concert. And my vision is to showcase and celebrate the incredible talent that we have, be it visual, music, live arts, performances, shaping the narrative of showcasing and celebrating our community members and what Edmonton has to offer the world in bigger and better every year. And if I could stretch this whole river valley and do it, I would.
Thanks for joining us for the Relevance Report. This week's episode was produced by Amanda Erickson, Zach Defoe, Evan Wyatt, and myself, Stefano Farah. This show was edited by Amanda Erickson. The show's supervising producer is Sheena Rossiter. Additional studio supervision by Sasha Stanojevic. This podcast is produced as part of the BCSC 325 Radio News and Documentaries course in the winter 2024 semester. The course is part of the Bachelor of Communications Studies program in the Department of Communication at MacEwan University. The show was edited and produced out of the MacEwan Media Production Studio. This podcast was recorded on Treaty 6 territory, the traditional and ancestral territory of the Cree, Dene, Blackfoot, Saulteaux, and Nakota Sioux. We acknowledge that this territory is home to the Métis settlements and the Métis Nation of Alberta, Regions 2, 3, and 4, within the historical Northwest Métis homeland. Our theme music is called Buzzing by Kaylee Lambert, Stings by Break Studio, and logo design for this podcast by Sasha Stanojevic. Once again, I'm Stefano Farah, your host for this week's episode. Don't forget to subscribe to the Relevance Report on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you like what you heard, please leave us a rating and review. It really helps people find the show. Please join us again next week when we report the relevant stories that are shaping our world.